Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. It wasn't supposed to be a meeting that would change his life. The sun was beginning to set over the sprawling countryside as the luxury sports car coasted smoothly along the quiet road, a perfect symbol of wealth and status. Inside, Marcus Hill, a successful millionaire entrepreneur, sat behind the wheel, his mind lost in thought. The world outside seemed like a blur. He was used to fast-paced environments, constant deals, and endless meetings. Today, however, had been different. The sleek black car turned a corner, its powerful engine purring with ease. But then, as the vehicle surged forward, something unexpected happened. A figure appeared at the edge of the road. A girl. A clumsy one. Marcus slammed on the brakes just in time, the car screeching to a halt mere inches from her. He could see her now, disheveled hair, an old plaid shirt and faded jeans. She stood there frozen, staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out, lowering the window. She blinked, clearly startled, then quickly stepped back, her face flushed with embarrassment. She wasn't hurt, but the awkwardness of the situation seemed to linger in the air. It was clear she had no idea how she had ended up in his path. I'm fine," she stammered, brushing dirt off her hands. "Sorry, I didn't mean to cause a scene." Marcus couldn't help but notice the nervous energy radiating from her, the way her hands fidgeted as she struggled to gather herself. "Are you lost?" he asked, half expecting her to respond with a shy nod. She didn't look like she belonged in this affluent area. She hesitated, glancing around before looking back at him. "I'm looking for the old mill. I'm supposed to meet my friend there." The words hung in the air, and Marcus frowned slightly. The old mill was a run-down property just outside of town. He had passed it a few times, but it was hardly a place anyone would choose to meet, especially in the middle of nowhere. "Well, it's not far from here, but you're better off taking the main road around," Marcus suggested, his voice still calm but laced with confusion. He had no idea why she would be in this area at all, much less alone. "Thanks, I'll manage." She smiled awkwardly, but Marcus noticed a flicker of something in her eyes. A hint of defiance, maybe. Or was it curiosity? He was about to pull away when she made a strange motion, as though she was about to wave him off and leave. But before he could make sense of the situation, something bizarre happened. The girl stumbled forward, tripping over a loose stone, and almost fell into the path of his car again. He swerved instinctively, narrowly avoiding the collision. "Watch out!" Marcus shouted. She looked horrified, her hands flailing as she tried to regain her balance. "I'm so sorry!" she exclaimed, flustered and embarrassed beyond belief. "I'm just clumsy today." It was the understatement of the century. Marcus couldn't help but smile despite himself. There was something oddly endearing about her, despite the awkwardness of the situation. She looked so out of place here, and yet there was an unspoken charm about her. Maybe it was the fact that she didn't care about appearances, or maybe it was the genuine honesty in her voice. Whatever it was, it made Marcus pause. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked again, his curiosity piqued by this strange encounter. Her response was a small, sheepish laugh. "I'm fine, just a little off today." He raised an eyebrow. "A little off? You almost caused me to crash my car." "I'd say it's more than a little." The girl shot him a quick glance, eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, I didn't ask you to stop, did I?" Marcus felt a flicker of surprise at her blunt response. Most people in his world would never speak to him that way. They would have apologized profusely, tried to make amends, but this girl... She seemed unbothered by the awkwardness, as if she couldn't care less about the consequences. He smiled, genuinely intrigued now. "Fair enough," he said, "but you really should be more careful around here. It's easy to get distracted, and this road is dangerous." She gave a small nod, her expression softening. "I'll be more careful next time. Thanks for the advice." Something in her voice made Marcus feel something he couldn't quite define. It wasn't admiration or pity, it was something deeper, something that lingered in the air between them. He couldn't place it, but it was there. "Well, good luck finding your friend," he said, preparing to drive off. But as he shifted the car into gear, she took a step toward him, as if she wanted to say something. "Wait!" she called out, her voice hesitant. Do you think I could ask you something?" Marcus looked back at her, genuinely curious now. "Go ahead." Her gaze flickered toward the old mill in the distance, and then back to him. "Do you think I could get a ride?" "To the mill. I really don't want to walk there." For a moment Marcus considered the request. He didn't know why she seemed so desperate, but something in her eyes made it impossible for him to refuse. "Sure. Hop in," he said, unlocking the door. She hesitated only for a moment before sliding into the passenger seat, still looking a little unsure. But as she fastened her seatbelt, the air between them seemed to shift. The tension was palpable as the car pulled away. Marcus couldn't help but glance at her. She was so different from the people he was used to, so raw, so unpolished, and yet in some strange way that made her more intriguing. The minutes ticked by in silence, broken only by the hum of the engine. But Marcus found himself growing, more and more curious. Who was she? Why was she here, alone in the middle of nowhere? And what was it about her that made him feel so alive? He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something that would turn his world upside down. The silence in the car felt different now. It was no longer awkward, but rather charged with a quiet tension. Marcus kept his hands firmly on the wheel, but his mind was far from the road. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl sitting beside him. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met before. Her clumsiness, the way she had brushed off his concern earlier, it all seemed so real, so genuine. His curiosity had been piqued, and as they drove along the road toward the old mill, he couldn't help but glance over at her every now and then. She sat with her arms crossed, staring out the window, seemingly lost in thought. Her posture was relaxed, but her face was unreadable, her expression distant. "So," Marcus began, trying to break the silence, "I didn't catch your name." The girl glanced at him for a brief moment, almost as though she was startled by the question. "Oh, right, I'm Abby," she replied, her voice softer than before. "And you are?" "Marcus," he said, offering a small smile. "Nice to meet you, Abby." She nodded but didn't say anything more. The silence returned, but this time it felt less uncomfortable. Marcus didn't push her. He knew how it felt to need space, to want to keep your thoughts to yourself. He respected that. The car cruised through the winding road, passing fields and distant hills. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting an orange glow over the landscape. The old mill came into view, a decaying structure standing in stark contrast to the beautiful countryside surrounding it. It was eerie, almost as though it didn't belong. As they approached the mill, Abby's fingers began to twitch nervously, as though she were about to speak. But then she quickly withdrew them, folding her hands back in her lap. Marcus noticed this and decided to ask again, his voice gentle but firm. "Abby, you're not just meeting a friend here, are you?" She stiffened slightly at his question, her eyes flickering toward him before turning back to the mill. "Why do you ask?" she replied, her tone defensive but not unkind. "I don't know," Marcus said, his curiosity taking the lead. "There's something about you. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I feel like there's more to the story than you're letting on." Abby didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared out the window, watching the mill grow closer. The darkened windows of the building seemed to reflect the fading light in an almost sinister way, making it look like the mill was watching them approach. It was as though the place itself was waiting for something to happen. Finally, Abby sighed, her shoulders slumping as she spoke. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not just meeting a friend." Marcus frowned, slowing the car as they reached the dirt road leading up to the mill. He turned off the engine and looked at her, waiting for her to continue. She seemed hesitant, as though she were trying to figure out how much to share. I grew up around here, she began, her voice low. This place, it's got a lot of memories for me, bad ones. I haven't been back in years, but something pulled me here today. Marcus waited, sensing that this was a story she needed to tell on her own terms. The quiet in the car felt almost oppressive now, as though the very air around them was thick with unspoken truths. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together as she spoke. When I was younger, I came here a lot. It was where I used to run when things got tough at home. It was a place to hide, Abby continued, her voice trembling slightly. But now, it's just a reminder of everything that went wrong. Marcus watched her, the vulnerability in her voice catching him off guard. He had never seen anyone open up so quickly. Most people in his world were guarded, hiding their real selves behind masks of wealth, status, and social expectation. But Abby, she wore her emotions openly, like an open book for anyone to read, and yet there was still something that held her back. I know it sounds silly, but I came here hoping to find something, Abby said, her gaze turning distant again. Something that would make sense of all the chaos, all the pain I've been through. Marcus felt a strange pull of empathy. He didn't know what she had been through, but he could hear the ache in her voice, the loss, the struggle. It reminded him of his own past, of how he had worked so hard to build the life he had now, never stopping to truly feel or acknowledge the scars he had from his own battles. "Finding peace?" Marcus asked gently. She nodded but didn't respond. Immediately. Instead, she opened the door and stepped out of the car, her feet crunching on the gravel as she made her way toward the mill. Marcus followed her, unsure of what to say or do next. He felt as if he were walking into a scene he had no part in, an unwelcome observer to something deeply personal. "I used to think coming here would help me find the answers," Abby said, her voice echoing in the silence of the night. "But maybe it's time to face it, whatever it is that's been holding me back." Marcus stood a few feet behind her, unsure of what to say. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle of Abby's life. She was so different from the women he was used to, so raw, so real, but there was also something undeniably magnetic about her. The way she carried herself, the way she spoke, the way she seemed so unafraid to show her emotions. It made him want to understand her more. "Abby," Marcus began, but his words died in his throat as she turned back to face him. Her eyes were filled with a quiet sadness, but there was something else there, too. Something defiant. "I don't need your help," she said firmly, her voice steady. "But I do appreciate the ride." Marcus stood there, watching her, feeling the weight of the moment. It was clear that there was more to Abby than met the eye, but he couldn't yet grasp the full picture. She was like a mystery waiting to be unraveled, and he couldn't help but feel that somehow he was drawn into it. As she turned and disappeared into the shadows of the mill, Marcus stayed where he was for a moment longer, his thoughts swirling. What was it about her? And why did he feel like he had just witnessed something monumental? He didn't know it yet, but this moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The night air was cool and still as Marcus stood outside the old mill, the silence around him broken only by the distant rustling of leaves in the wind. Abby had disappeared inside the crumbling building, leaving him standing at the threshold of something he couldn't quite understand. He felt an odd tension, like the weight of the world was pressing in on him, yet the answers he sought seemed just out of reach. He had barely taken a few steps toward the mill when he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him. He turned around, expecting to see Abby, but instead it was a figure he hadn't expected, a tall, broad-shouldered man, walking slowly towards him. His face was hardened with age, his eyes shadowed by years of experience. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice betraying the surprise he felt. The man's presence was imposing, and there was something in his demeanor that set Marcus on edge. The man stopped just a few feet away, his gaze never leaving Marcus. There was a long pause, and Marcus felt his heart beat a little faster, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. "Just a passerby," the man said, his voice gravelly. "But you might want to be careful around here." "Careful?" Marcus repeated, his eyebrows furrowing. "What do you mean?" The man's lips curled into a tight smile, but it wasn't friendly. "The mill holds secrets. People like you, people who think they can come and go without consequences. They don't realize the danger until it's too late." Before Marcus could respond, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness as silently as he had appeared. Marcus stood there, perplexed and unsettled by the brief encounter. What did he mean? What kind of danger was lurking around here? He didn't have time to ponder it for long. He needed to find Abby. The longer she was inside the mill, the more uneasy he became. Something wasn't right. Marcus walked toward the entrance of the mill, pushing open the rusted doors with a creak that echoed through the empty space. The interior was dark, save for a sliver of moonlight streaming through broken windows. The musty scent of old wood and dust filled the air as he stepped inside, his footsteps muffled by the thick layers of dirt on the floor. "Abby," he called out, his voice reverberating in the silence. No response. He moved deeper into the mill, his heart beating faster. The shadows seemed to twist around him, the oppressive atmosphere of the place weighing heavily on his chest. His instincts told him to leave, but something compelled him to continue, to find Abby and make sure she was all right. Suddenly he heard a soft sound. Footsteps, but not his own. They were light, almost imperceptible, but they were there. He followed the sound, moving cautiously through the maze of old machinery and broken furniture, his eyes straining to adjust to the dim light. Then he saw her. Abby was standing near the back of the mill, her back turned to him. She was staring at something in the distance, her shoulders tense, her body rigid. It was as if she hadn't noticed him approach. "Abby!" Marcus called again, his voice softer this time. She flinched, and for a brief moment Marcus thought she might bolt. But instead, she slowly turned to face him. Her eyes were wide, filled with something he couldn't quite place. Fear, desperation. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I thought I told you to go." Marcus took a cautious step forward. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on. You came here for a reason, Abby. What is it?" She hesitated, her lips pressed together in a thin line. For a moment she said nothing, but her eyes darted around the room as if she were looking for something or someone. "I came here to face something," Abby said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Something I've been running from for years." Marcus waited, sensing that she was about to reveal something important. He stepped closer, not wanting to push her but needing to understand. "What are you running from?" he asked gently. Abby's eyes flickered with pain as she finally spoke. "My past, my father, the things he did, the things I saw." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. There was a deep sadness in Abby's voice, something heavy that weighed down on her every word. "What did he do?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as though trying to block out the memories. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. "He wasn't a good man, Marcus. He did things, terrible things. Things that I couldn't stop, and I've spent my whole life trying to forget, trying to escape, but I can't, not really." Her words hung in the air, a confession that felt like a burden, as if she had been carrying this secret for far too long. Marcus didn't know what to say. He could see the pain in her eyes, the rawness of her emotions, and he felt a sudden urge to help her, to take away the weight she had been carrying for so many years. "Abby," he said softly, his voice filled with empathy. "You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here for you, She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You don't understand. I thought I could deal with it. I thought I could move on, but every time I try, the past comes rushing back, and it always brings me here." "Here," Marcus repeated, glancing around the mill. Abby nodded. "This was where everything changed. The mill was where my father—" Her voice trailed off, and she couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. Marcus stepped closer, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "Abby, whatever it is, you don't have to go through it by yourself. You can leave it behind. You can move forward." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Can I? Can I really move on? Or am I just going to keep running forever?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he took her hand and gently guided her out of the mill. The moonlight bathed the surrounding fields in a soft glow as they stepped outside, the cool breeze rustling the leaves around them. As they stood there in the quiet night, Abby finally seemed to breathe a little easier. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was facing her past, not running from it. And for some reason, she knew she wasn't alone. The morning after their encounter at the mill, Marcus awoke with a heavy sense of anticipation. He couldn't shake the thoughts of Abby from his mind. It had only been a few days since their first meeting, and yet it felt like his entire world had shifted. Her story, her vulnerability, had left an imprint on him that he couldn't ignore. He stood by the large windows of his penthouse, the city skyline stretching out before him, but his thoughts were far away. They were back at the old mill, and Abby, despite all the pain she carried, had begun to open up to him in ways that few ever had. She had admitted to him that her past had haunted her for years. Her father's sins were not just a distant memory. They were a constant, suffocating presence in her life. And now, Abby was standing on the edge of confronting that past. As Marcus stood there, staring at the horizon, a strange sense of urgency gripped him. He had to know more. He had to help her. But more than that, he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something was off, that there was more to Abby's past than she had told him. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see his assistant Sarah standing in the doorway, holding a stack of papers in her hands. "Mr. Hill, you've got a meeting in an hour," Sarah said, her tone polite but professional. Marcus gave her a distracted nod. "I'll be there in a minute. Just need to make a few calls." Sarah left him alone, but Marcus's mind was elsewhere. He had been running his company for years, making million-dollar deals and managing high-profile clients, but today none of that mattered. Abby's story had gripped him in a way he didn't understand, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt like he wasn't in control of his own life. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself thinking more about Abby than anything else. He tried to focus on his business, but her face kept flashing in his mind. The way she had looked at him the night they met, there had been something in her eyes, something that told him she was holding back, keeping secrets. He needed to know the truth. Around noon, Marcus made a decision. He called his driver and ordered him to take him to the outskirts of town, to the place where everything had begun, the old mill. Abby wasn't there when Marcus arrived. He parked his car near the broken gate and walked toward the mill. The sense of unease settling in his chest again. The mill stood, as it had the night before, in eerie silence. There was no sign of life, no movement. It looked abandoned, like something long forgotten by the world. Marcus's footsteps echoed through the empty space as he entered, the air thick with the smell of decay. Dust danced in the air, disturbed only by his presence. The moonlight from the night before was now replaced by the harsh daylight streaming through the cracked windows, revealing the true state of the mill, an ugly, decaying shell of what it once was. He took slow, deliberate steps toward the back, where he had last seen Abby. His eyes scanned the area, looking for any sign of her. But there was nothing. The place was as empty as it appeared on the outside. Just as he was about to leave, a noise from behind caught his attention. He spun around, his heart racing. But it wasn't Abby. It was someone else, someone he didn't recognize. The man stood just inside the doorway, his posture relaxed, but there was a quiet menace about him. He was tall, with dark hair, and a face that seemed to be carved from stone. There was no warmth in his eyes, only cold calculation. Looking for someone? The man asked, his voice low and smooth. Marcus took a step back, his instincts on high alert. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made your skin crawl. "Doesn't matter who I am," the man replied, stepping closer. "What matters is that you're here, and that's a problem." Marcus's heart raced as the man moved toward him. He could feel the tension in the air, the feeling of danger closing in around him. This wasn't just some random encounter. This man had a purpose, and that purpose involved him. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but firm. The man's eyes glinted with something dark, something dangerous. "I could ask you the same question," he said, his voice growing colder. "But it doesn't matter. You're in this now, whether you want to be or not." Marcus's mind raced as the man stepped closer. He could feel the threat in the air, the weight of the situation pressing in on him. He had to get out of here. But there was something about this man, something that made Marcus believe this wasn't just about him. This was about Abby. "I don't know who you are," Marcus said, his voice tight, "but I'm leaving." The man laughed softly, almost as if he were amused by Marcus's words. "You're not leaving, Marcus. Not yet. Not until you understand what's really going on here." Before Marcus could react, the man lunged, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall of the mill. The air was knocked out of him, but he quickly recovered, pushing the man off with all his strength. They both stumbled back, eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. "I don't know what you're after, but if you think you can scare me, you're wrong," Marcus said, his voice cold and filled with determination. The man didn't respond with words. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a small black device, and pressed a button. A faint beeping sound filled the room, and then, from the shadows, another figure emerged. Abby. Marcus froze, his heart stopping in his chest. Abby stood. Before him, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't just fear that Marcus saw in her eyes. There was something else, something darker. "Abby," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. She didn't respond. Instead, she took a step back, as if she were distancing herself from him. The man beside her, who now seemed to be her ally, smiled again, his eyes glinting with malicious intent. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" the man said, his voice mocking. "You think you can just waltz in and fix everything. Abby's past is a part of her, Marcus, and you're too late to change that." Marcus's mind was reeling. What was happening? Why was Abby with this man? Was she in danger, or was there something else going on here? He needed answers, and he needed them fast. But before he could say another word, the man turned and gave Abby a quick nod. She stepped forward, her eyes still not meeting Marcus's. She opened her mouth as though to speak, but the words never came. In that moment, Marcus knew everything had changed. The answers he was seeking were no longer simple. They were tangled in a web of deceit and danger, danger that now had a firm grip on both of their lives. And the worst part, Abby was at the center of it. Marcus stood there in the dim light of the old mill, his heart pounding in his chest as the world around him shifted from something he thought he understood into something completely unrecognizable. The man in front of him, the one who had knocked him against the wall with an almost unnatural force, was no longer just a stranger. He was a key to a dangerous puzzle, one that Marcus now found himself unwillingly tangled in. Abby stood a few feet away from him, her expression unreadable, her eyes avoiding his. There was an air of finality about her, like she had made a decision, one that Marcus could not yet comprehend. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't know where to start. "Abby, what's going on?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't look at him, but her hand trembled slightly at her side. The man next to her, the one with the cold eyes, gave Marcus a smile that sent chills down his spine. "You really thought you could just waltz into her life and fix everything, didn't you?" The man's voice was low and mocking. "You're far too late for that. You don't know anything about Abby, do you? About what she's been through, about what she's become." Marcus's confusion deepened with every word, but he refused to let it overwhelm him. His focus remained on Abby. He had to understand why she was involved in this. Why had she become entangled with these dangerous people? Why had she kept her past hidden from him? "Abby," Marcus said again, taking a step forward. "Please talk to me. What is all this about? Why are you here with him?" Abby's eyes flickered toward him for just a moment, a fleeting glance that held so much more than words could express. There was pain in her eyes, a deep sorrow that she had carried for so long. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, she closed her eyes, a deep breath escaping her lips. This is what I was afraid of," Abby said finally, her voice cracking with emotion. "This is what I've been running from," the man beside her snorted in amusement. "Running, hiding, what difference does it make? It's all part of the same game." Marcus turned his gaze back to the man, his fists clenching in frustration. "Who are you? And what are you talking about?" The man chuckled darkly. "I should have known she'd pick a knight in shining armor to come to her rescue," he said, looking at Marcus with a mixture of disdain and amusement. "But let's not get sidetracked. Let's talk about Abby and what she's really been doing here." Marcus's mind raced. This wasn't just about Abby's past. It was about something much darker, something far more dangerous. And the man standing before him was clearly in the middle of it. "Abby," Marcus said, his voice softer now, "you don't have to face this alone. Whatever it is, I'll help you." But Abby shook her head, her lips trembling. "No, Marcus, you don't understand. You can't help me. No one can." The pain in her voice was enough to make Marcus stop in his tracks. There was a finality in her tone that struck him harder than anything she had said before. She had already given up. She had already accepted the consequences of whatever she had done. The man stepped forward, his hand on Abby's shoulder, as if marking his territory. "She's already made her choice. She's with us now. She always has been." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, with us?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "She's not involved with you. She can't be." Abby finally met his gaze, and for the first time since they had met, there was a hardness in her eyes, a coldness that wasn't there before. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she said softly, almost apologetically. "But you don't know the whole story. You don't know what I've been through, what I've had to do." Marcus felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. This wasn't the Abby he had come to know, the clumsy, kind-hearted girl who had stumbled into his life. This was someone else entirely, someone trapped in a world far darker than he could have imagined. "Tell me, Abby," Marcus said, his voice low, "tell me what you're involved in. Please." Abby took a deep breath, her gaze flickering toward the man beside her, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. She looked back at Marcus, her expression softening just slightly. "I never wanted you to know," she whispered. "I never wanted anyone to know, but I can't keep running from this anymore." She looked away from him, as if gathering the courage to speak the words she had kept buried for so long. Marcus stood there, waiting, the silence stretching between them like an unbearable weight. I grew up in a family that was in deep with the wrong people," Abby said, her voice barely audible. "My father, he wasn't just a criminal. He was part of something bigger, something dangerous, and I got caught up in it. I didn't know how deep it went until it was too late." Marcus listened intently, his heart heavy with each word. She spoke. It was as if he was hearing her for the first time. Everything he had believed about Abby was being shattered in an instant. "The things I did to survive," Abby continued, her voice faltering. "The things I had to do to keep my family safe. I'm not proud of them, but I did what I had to do, and I thought I could leave it all behind. I thought I could start fresh, but I couldn't. They came after me, they found me, and now I'm involved in something that I can't escape." Marcus's mind raced as the weight of her words sank in. Abby had been running from a past that wasn't just about her father. It was about a whole network of people, a dangerous world that she had been born into, and one that she had never truly escaped. "Abby," Marcus said, his voice filled with both compassion and disbelief. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to be part of this anymore. I'll help you. We can leave. We can start over, together." But Abby's face hardened again, her eyes distant. "It's too late for that, Marcus. There's no escaping this. I've tried to run, to hide, but they always find me, and they always drag me back into their world." The man beside her stepped forward again, his voice cold and final. "She's right. It's too late. You think you can just walk away from us, from this life. You're mistaken." Marcus looked between the two of them, the realization dawning on him that Abby had already been marked by the people she was involved with, and now they were dragging him into it too. "I'm not leaving her," Marcus said firmly, his gaze fixed on the man. "Whatever it takes, I'll help her. I won't let you use her." The man's lips curled into a smile, but there was no humor in it. "You think you have a choice. You're already involved, whether you want to be or not. And you'll learn that the hard way." Abby's eyes were filled with regret as she looked at Marcus. "I didn't want this for you. I never wanted you to be a part of this. But now you're too deep." Marcus swallowed hard, his mind racing. He couldn't let her go through this alone. He wouldn't abandon her, not now. "I won't give up on you, Abby," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Not now, not ever." But as the man stepped closer, a chilling realization struck Marcus. This wasn't just about Abby anymore. It was about him, too. He had just walked into a world where survival meant more than anything else, and the price of failure was far higher than he could have imagined. The tension was unbearable. The air in the old mill felt thicker than ever, as if it were pressing in on Marcus from all sides. He stood there, facing Abby and the man who had brought her into this twisted world, feeling as if he were walking on the edge of a precipice, with nothing but darkness below. The stakes had never been higher, and the choices he made now could determine not just his future, but Abby's as well. Abby's face was a mixture of sorrow and determination. She had already accepted the inevitability of her fate, but Marcus refused to let her give up. He couldn't, not after everything they had shared, not after everything they had been through together. He had come to care for her more deeply than he had ever imagined, and the thought of her being consumed by this world of shadows was something he could not accept. The man standing beside her, the one who had taunted Marcus and manipulated Abby, gave him a look of cold amusement. His presence was almost suffocating, like a predator circling its prey. "You're still not getting it, are you?" the man said, his voice low and mocking. "You think you can walk away from this? You think you can fix her? There's no escape, Marcus. No salvation for her. She's ours now." Abby closed her eyes as though trying to block out the words. But Marcus could see it. He could see the guilt, the regret in her eyes. It was there, buried deep within her, but it was still there. She had never truly wanted this life, but it had become her prison. "No," Marcus said firmly, shaking his head. "I refuse to believe that. There's always a way out. There's always a chance for redemption." The man laughed, his laughter echoing through the empty mill like a chilling wind. Redemption, you're a fool if you think that. She's been through too much, Marcus. You don't understand the kind of world she's been living in. It's not something you can fix with a pretty speech or a few kind words. Marcus took a step forward, his eyes locked on Abby. He refused to let her fall back into that world. She deserved more than this. He believed in her. He believed that she could break free from the chains of her past, just as he had broken free from the chains of his own. "I don't care what you say," Marcus said, his voice unwavering. "I believe in her, and I won't stop until she's free. She's not a prisoner. She's not your property." The man's smile faded slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You have no idea what you're up against. You think you're the hero, but you're not. You're just another pawn in a game you don't even understand." Marcus clenched his fists, frustration and anger bubbling to the surface. "Then teach me," he said, his voice challenging. "Show me what you've got, because I won't back down." The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced at Abby, his eyes flickering with something that could almost be called pity. "You really think you can save her, don't you? You think you can erase everything that's happened, all the things she's done, the things she's had to do just to survive?" Abby's shoulders slumped slightly, her eyes downcast, as if the weight of his words were too much to bear. "I've done things, Marcus," she said softly. "Things I'm not proud of. Things that make me unworthy of your help. You should have stayed away. You should have never gotten involved." "No," Marcus said, shaking his head again, more forcefully this time. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here because I believe in you, Abby. You're not defined by your past. You're not the person you were, and I'm not letting you go back to that." She looked up at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was too overwhelmed, too broken to say anything that could change the reality of the situation. The man beside her, however, wasn't finished. He took a step closer, his eyes flashing with malice. "You're a fool if you think you can just take her away from us. She's part of something bigger than both of you. She doesn't get to walk away. Not now, not ever." Marcus took another step forward, his resolve hardening. "I don't care about your so-called bigger picture. I care about her, and I'm not leaving without her." For a moment there was a silence. It was a silence filled with the weight of all the choices, all the battles and all the pain that had led to this point. It was as though the world itself had stopped, holding its breath, waiting for the next move. And then, just as Marcus thought the situation was at a standstill, Abby took a step toward him. Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, and she touched his arm. The gesture was small, but it spoke volumes. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you don't understand. I've already made my choice. I can't keep running. I can't keep hiding from what I've done." Marcus's heart tightened as he looked at her. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the battle between the person she was and the person she wanted to be. She had never truly been free of her past. It had followed her like a shadow, always there, never letting her forget. But Marcus wasn't about to let her face this alone. "I'm not asking you to forget your past," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm asking you to let go of it. You don't have to be that person anymore. You don't have to carry the weight of everything you've done. You can start fresh. We can start fresh, together." Abby's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head slowly, as though trying to convince herself of the truth of his words. "But it's not that simple. It's never been that simple. You don't know what they'll do to me, what they'll do to us if we try to leave." Marcus reached for her hand, holding it gently. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We'll face whatever comes together. I'm not afraid." Abby looked at him for a long moment, her face torn between fear and hope. And then finally, she nodded. The smallest, most fragile gesture. But it was enough. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "I really do. The man who had been watching them silently finally spoke, his voice thick with contempt. "You're making a mistake. All of you. This isn't over. You can't escape what's coming, and neither can she." Marcus turned toward him, his eyes blazing with defiance. "I don't care what you think. You can't control us. Not anymore." The man sneered but didn't respond. For a moment the air seemed to crackle with the tension of an impending confrontation. But then the man simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the mill. There was no need for further words. He knew he had lost, and with his departure, the oppressive weight that had hung over them began to lift. If only. And for a moment, Abby's eyes never left Marcus. She took a deep breath, and for the first time since they had met, she smiled. It wasn't much, just the faintest glimmer of hope, but it was enough to let Marcus know that they had crossed a threshold. They had reached the point where no matter how dark things had seemed, they were no longer alone in the fight. "We're not done yet," Marcus said, his voice strong, "but we'll face it together. You don't have to fight your past alone. And you don't have to be afraid anymore." Abby nodded, her heart heavy but filled with a new sense of possibility. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges they couldn't yet see. But for the first time, Abby believed that they could overcome them, together, the end.